Welcome to our deep dive on the $100,000 severance trap and why dual income families must rethink the stay-at-home dream. First, we will set the stage with what this decision really means for your finances and your family. Next, we will outline the risks, the strategy to use the severance as a buffer, and the emotional transition. Finally, we will end with key takeaways and tools you can apply right away. Here's today's roadmap. First, we will contextualize the severance decision. Then, we will examine the immediate financial shockwave. After that, we will cover the 4Ds risk framework and how to protect against single-income catastrophe. Next, we will show how to deploy the severance strategically as a buffer rather than a bet. Then, we will discuss the identity shift and mental health. Afterwards, we will walk through a month-by-month timeline. Finally, we will test your understanding with a quick quiz and summarize key points. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. This video is for educational purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal, or tax advice. Your circumstances are unique, so please consult with a licensed professional who can tailor recommendations to your situation. With that established, let's move forward. Let's set the stakes. A $100,000 severance package can look like a golden ticket, especially for families pursuing financial independence. However, after taxes, many households will see something closer to $60,000. Simultaneously, shifting from two incomes to one changes your household risk profile overnight. That is why we must examine cash flow, risk protection, and personal identity before making the move. Now, let's quantify the financial shockwave. Here is the shockwave in numbers. Suppose your dual income net was $10,000 per month. After one partner exits, you land at $7,000. If your spending remains $9,000, you face a $2,000 monthly deficit. This gap can quickly consume the severance. At $2,000 per month, you burn about $24,000 a year. Therefore, high-quality discretionary spending like travel, dining, and gear needs to be trimmed immediately. Liquidity becomes critical because cash buys time for deliberate, rather than panicked, decisions. Next, let's make the gap visible with a before and after budget. This table contrasts a typical dual income baseline with a single income reality. Net income falls from $10,000 to $7,000. Housing remains fixed in the short run. Childcare may drop if one parent stays home, but it rarely falls to zero. Insurance costs often rise because you will need robust term life and disability coverage. Discretionary spending must be reduced immediately. Savings and investing may need to pause temporarily to prioritize liquidity. Even after these cuts, many families remain close to or above the new income, so hidden costs must be monitored. Now, let's discuss why single income risk is amplified by the 4Ds. A single paycheck magnifies exposure to 4 catastrophic risks: death, disability, divorce, and job loss. To mitigate death risk, put substantial term life in place, often 10 to 12 times the working partner's income for 20 to 30 years. For disability, prioritize own occupation policies with residual and cost of living adjustment riders. To reduce divorce risk, maintain financial transparency, consider counseling, have a legal plan, and ensure credit exists in both names. For job loss, maintain 6 to 12 months of expenses in highly liquid reserves while nurturing your professional network and keeping credentials current. With the risk framing clear, let's turn to how the severance should be deployed. This flowchart lays out a practical path for allocating a $100,000 severance. First, taxes reduce the gross amount to an approximate net of $60,000. Next, the funds are routed to liquidity in a high-yield savings account, coverage for the expected monthly deficit, necessary insurance premiums, and no near-term expenses as sinking funds. Any remainder may be placed in very short-term, low-volatility instruments like Treasury bills, or a Treasury ETF such as SGOV. There is a branch forcing discretionary spending cuts and another encouraging side income or consulting. Monthly review checkpoints create a feedback loop to adjust the depth of cuts or increase income if the deficit persists. Now that the structure is clear, let's translate it into actionable steps. Use the severance as a buffer, not a bet. First, open or confirm a high-yield savings account for immediate liquidity. Next, quantify the monthly deficit and pre-fund 6 to 12 months. Then, place additional near-term needs in short-term certificates of deposit or treasury bills. For modest yield with liquidity, consider ultra-short treasury ETFs like SGOV. Importantly, do not allocate this cash to volatile investments like equity index funds, because capital preservation is the priority. Concurrently, cut discretionary spending immediately and lock in risk protection for the working partner with term life and own occupation disability coverage. If needed, pause retirement contributions temporarily to preserve cash. Finally, institute monthly reviews and explore part-time or consulting work to maintain employability and diversify income. Now, let's explore the identity transition that often gets overlooked. The financial plan is only half the journey. First, redefine success away from promotions toward family milestones and personal growth. Next, anticipate adaptation costs such as therapy or coaching, because the identity shift from professional to stay-at-home parent can be emotionally disruptive. Then, establish structure through daily routines, equitable childcare distribution, and protected personal time. Additionally, maintain a professional foothold with certifications, industry reading, and small consulting projects to ease potential re-entry. Finally, consider a written transition pact covering roles, money rules, and scheduled check-ins to reduce conflict. To bring everything together over time, let's map a 12-month transition. This timeline illustrates a structured 12-month transition. Initially, you accept the package, open a high-yield savings account, set up a short-term ladder, and purchase necessary insurance. Next, you stabilize by cutting discretionary spending, revising the budget, updating estate documents, and canceling extras. Then, you optimize by setting a stay-at-home routine, initiating consulting, and tracking metrics monthly. Afterwards, you fortify by adjusting cuts, renewing your network, updating your resume, and adding a targeted skill course. Finally, you decide whether to continue as a single-income household, return to work, or pursue a hybrid approach. With the plan framed, let's test your understanding. Quiz time. The question is, where should most of the $100,000 severance, netting around $60,000, be parked during the transition? The options are A, high-yield savings, short-term certificates of deposit, and ultra-short treasuries such as SGOVB, a broad equity index fund such as VOO. C, crypto. D, a venture capital fund with lockups. You may pause the video now to think about the answer. We will discuss the answer in the next section of the video. The correct answer is A. Capital preservation and liquidity are the priorities during a transition. High-yield savings, short-term certificates of deposit, and ultra-short treasuries maintain access to cash with minimal volatility. Placing the severance in equities, crypto, or illiquid funds jeopardizes the runway needed to adapt. Next, let's compare dual income and single income trade-offs side by side. Let's compare dual income and single income households. With dual income, you typically enjoy higher cash flow and a higher savings rate, diversified job risk, more ability to outsource childcare, and a potentially faster path to financial independence. With single income, you gain more parental time at home, lower commuting and possibly lower childcare costs, simpler logistics, and a clearer focus on family priorities. However, single income increases vulnerability to the 4Ds and requires tighter budgeting. Now, let's add a second quick quiz to reinforce the risk protection concept. Here is a second quiz. Which protection is most critical to put in place before one partner leaves work? Option A is a large whole-life policy on the stay-at-home parent. Option B is 20 to 30-year term life and own occupation disability on the working partner. Option C is cancel all insurance to save premiums. Option D is only increase the emergency fund and skip insurance. You may pause the video now to think about the answer. We will discuss the answer in the next section of the video. The correct answer is B. You must protect the income engine. Obtain substantial term life insurance on the working partner and an own occupation disability policy with appropriate riders. Emergency funds are essential, but they are not a substitute for risk transfer. Now let's include a quick Markdown mini guide you can screenshot. Here is a quick Markdown style mini guide. First, budget cut priorities include freezing travel upgrades, canceling premium subscriptions, downgrading phone plans, and meal planning with bulk staples. Next, the insurance checklist includes term life at 10 to 12 times income for 20 to 30 years, own occupation disability with residual and cost of living riders, and considering an umbrella liability policy. Finally, the monthly review template tracks remaining cash runway, actual versus budget variances, and job market activities such as networking and certifications. Next, let's wrap with key points. These are the key takeaways. Use severance as a buffer, not a bet. Cut discretionary spending immediately. Ensure the working partner with term life and own occupation disability coverage. Maintain liquidity in high-yield savings, short-term certificates of deposit, and ultra-short treasuries. Protect identity and mental health through structure and support. Finally, conduct monthly reviews and consider part-time or consulting to diversify income. Now let's summarize and give you a final nudge to take action. In summary, begin with liquidity and safety. Quantify the monthly deficit and pre-fund it. Put your risk shield in place before shifting to a single income. Design your identity transition intentionally. Then, review monthly and iterate based on results. Finally, here is a closing message. Thank you for watching. If this was helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. Tell us in the comments what you would cut first and how you would deploy a severance to protect your family. See you in the next video.